You ever wake up, take a sip of coffee, step out on your back porch, and then realize somebody stole your family's history and buried it in a pile of contractor trash? That morning I froze because my grandfather's quarry, 42 stubborn acres he'd scraped out of Missouri limestone with his own hands, wasn't a quarry anymore. It was a dump, and the woman grinning at the edge of it, like she'd just done the world a favor, held a latte and called herself the HOA president. That one grin, it woke something in me I hadn't known I had, and what happened next changed everything for them. My name is Daryl Voss. I grew up where the hills smell like wet limestone after rain, where a man's land is his religion, where my grandfather Ernest blasted out a pit we called Voss Pond and made a living doing honest work. By the time it reached me, the quarry wasn't a roaring business. It was a turquoise pond, a slice of county geography kids had been sneaking into for decades, a place with that quiet, stubborn beauty that makes you protective before you even think about it. 3 years before the trash, a developer put a subdivision up next to my place. Ridgerest Estates, slick brochures, model homes priced for retirees and remote workers who wanted country character with assurances. With that came Constance Farwell, organizational energy in human form. She ran the HOA like a little kingdom, with a 3-ring binder and a laser pointer and the kind of smile a chess player gives when they've just taken your queen. It started as a zoning fight. Gravel and traffic property values said more times than I could count, and I lost 1 vote at the county meeting, which should have been my first warning. Then my fence was cut clean as a seam bolt cutter marks, and fresh tire tracks heading to the lower terrace. Small loads of contractor trash, at first shingles, broken tile, then a full trailer dumped at midnight drywall chunks, PVC pipe, even an upright toilet staring up at the sky like a grotesque totem. The smell of damp drywall adhesive put a physical knot in my chest. I called the sheriff, filed reports, repaired the fence, posted no trespassing signs, and then they came back and did it again. I didn't storm anyone's gate. I documented. I bought 6 trail cameras, the Hunter kind. Waterproof, motion-triggered, mounted them to catch plates. Face's angle of approach, and I fed the feeds to the cloud. I called my cousin Bev, paralegal relentless, and asked her to pull the HOA's public records, articles of incorporation, CC&Rs, meeting minutes, vendor lists. When you're headed toward court, paper beats shouting every time. 2 weeks later, the cameras caught the white pickup, Ridgerest Property Services, LLC, pulling a dump trailer at 11:47 p.m. Missouri, plates the driver wearing a hat. I backed everything up, printed time-stamped stills, made copies. Patience, it turned out, is a weapon. Arrogance accumulates receipts. Then a certified letter arrived, Ridgerest Estates HOA, signed by Constance and 2 board members, petitioning the county to reclassify my quarry as an inert waste disposal site. In plain English, they'd been dumping illegally on my land, and now they wanted the county to make it legal. I read that letter by the mailbox in late October and laughed that hollow laugh people make when their brain short circuits from audacity. I hired Augusta Crane, a property rights lawyer who smelled like old wood and coffee and moved with the calm precision of someone who'd won enough fights to make fury unnecessary. She told me 3 useful things: the county can't reclassify private land without proving public necessity and compensating the owner. Environmental violations, if the lab found regulated substances, could escalate to EPA jurisdiction. And HOA boards that secretly authorize payments to vendors without proper disclosure could face breach of fiduciary duty claims. Translation: this was winnable, but it would be a lot of work. Bev found the twist in the paperwork, the clause nobody reads, Article 7, Section 4 in the HOA's Articles of Incorporation, an indemnification provision that said if the association or its agents caused damage and a court later found willful misconduct, individual board members could be personally liable for remediation and attorney's fees. Personal joint liability. I remember staring at that sentence and feeling my whole afternoon rearrange. The case stopped being just about the HOA. As an entity, it reached into pocketbooks and retirement accounts. Constance Todd Shirley could be exposed personally. The twist was small, boring, and deadly. Gerald from the county environmental office came out and took samples. I hired Dr. Patricia Solano, an environmental engineer, to run a full site assessment, soil cores, groundwater testing, 3D mapping, plume analysis. The lab returned asbestos fibers and traces of lead in the dumped material, and once the EPA sniffed around, our leverage changed overnight. Augusta filed a formal complaint with EPA Region 7 in a civil suit for trespass, illegal disposal of hazardous materials, nuisance breach of fiduciary duty, private nuisance causing diminishment of property value, the works. Constance didn't fold. She doubled down: procedural motions, jurisdictional challenges, a political law firm, and even a whispered proposition to county commissioners, a picnic pavilion at the fairgrounds in exchange for tabling enforcement. When that failed, she weaponized the HOA rulebook, targeted violation notices against homeowners who signed a recall petition, petty charges about mailboxes and basketball hoops, classic selective enforcement meant to bury dissent in bureaucracy. 2 households backed down, the rest stood firm. Every petty letter only became more evidence. She also reached beyond paper. Someone called one of my aggregate customers and suggested I was the subject of federal investigation trying to spook business away from me. That went into the file as tortious interference with business relationships. Meanwhile, the invoice trail came back and showed the HOA had paid Ridgerest Property Services, LLC, to remove debris. But the service address on the invoice wasn't the community center, it was adjacent to my property. Fraud upon the membership moved from suspicion to documentary fact. We built pressure on 2 fronts: legal machinery and community action. I threaded documentation into public view camera stills, invoices, the lab report the Claus Bev found. I talked to neighbors in Ridgerest, including Phyllis, a retired school principal with a voice that quieted rooms, and within weeks, 61 households signed a petition for a special meeting and recall. Under Missouri law, 10% of membership can force a special meeting. We had more than that. And when homeowners realized their dues had funded this scheme, they were furious. I set a trap: additional cameras, motion-triggered floodlights, an alarm routed to Hank, a retired deputy who agreed to call it in if anything tripped after dark. At 12:23 a.m., a motion alert blinked on my phone. I watched the white pickup back the trailer down the terrace, slow and professional, and then deputies arrived 12 minutes after my call. The driver froze with a shovel in his hand, a printed work order in the cab, signed digitally and traceable to Todd Bleeker. He was arrested for trespass, illegal disposal, and tampering with evidence. Spoliation sanctions followed, and Todd's personal exposure turned criminal. Shirley resigned and offered to cooperate. Constance went quiet. Public pressure and legal exposure work in their own stubborn way, slowly, then suddenly. The county withdrew the reclassification petition. The recall vote at the community center was decisive. Ridgerest homeowners removed Constance in a room full of coffee, plywood, and relieved faces. The EPA confirmed contamination across thousands of square feet and ordered remediation. Dr. Solano's final report estimated cleanup costs in the hundreds of thousands, and the appraiser's highest and best use valuation put lost development rights in the millions. The math forced a settlement. We settled before trial: remediation, paid for damages for loss of use and diminishment of value, punitive damages for harassment and defamation, restitution for business interference, attorney's fees enough to make a grown man stare at his phone in disbelief when the wire confirmation hit. I used part of the settlement to finish the recreational space I'd wanted in the first place: a dock, a graded path, benches, native plantings, prairie grasses, and a stewardship scholarship in my grandfather's name for students studying environmental fields. The quarry reopened as a weekend preserve: free kids splashing families, bringing coolers, retirees taking photos, teenagers daring each other off the dock. Volunteers planted native grasses, and neighbors who'd signed petitions showed up with wheelbarrows, and we even held a small dedication with coffee lemonade and a scholarship announcement honoring my grandfather's name, the whole place humming like a small, restored miracle. The satisfying moments weren't flashy. Constance sold her house and moved away. Todd did community service at a landfill. Shirley cooperated. Homeowners elected new leadership. But what stayed with me was the pattern: abuse of power, love's silence, documentation kills it. The moral sneaked up slowly. Power looks for the quiet, the patient, the uncounted. Keep receipts, let them keep talking, and let facts do what anger can't. Justice in this case wasn't a bolt from the sky. It was methodical, boring, patient camera angles, lab reports, petitions, subpoenas, community turnout, and together those small, stubborn actions forced accountability. Now I step onto the porch with my coffee and listen sometimes to kids laughing at the pond, sometimes to nothing at all, and I'm glad the cliffs are clean and the water turquoise and the benches occupied. 3 generations of work weren't erased. They were defended and in an odd way made public and generous. My grandfather would have liked that. So tell me, did we do the right thing or was it too much? Have you ever had to stand up to a neighbor with more power than sense? Drop your story in your city below, because I read every comment. If this moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that the quiet ones can keep score, and sometimes they win.